It wasn't the fall that killed her. It was the landing. When 24-year-old Clara Bennett walked into the Sapphire Gala, she wasn't looking for a savior. She was looking for an exit. But when her vision blurred and her knees hit the marble floor, she didn't fall into oblivion. She fell into the arms of Lorenzo Moretti. The city knew him as a businessman. The streets knew him as the ghost of Chicago. He didn't call an ambulance. He didn't look for help. He pulled back her sleeve, saw the purple bruises shaped like fingerprints, and asked the question that would start a war. Who hurt you? This isn't a fairy tale. This is how the city burned. The chandeliers inside the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton didn't sparkle. They glared. To Clara Bennett, every crystal prism felt like an interrogation lamp, exposing the secrets she had plastered over with layers of cheap foundation and a forced smile. She adjusted the tray of champagne flutes in her hand, her knuckles white. She wasn't a guest here. She was invisible. A server, just another moving part in the machinery of Chicago's elite, hired by a temp agency that didn't ask questions about why she flinched when men raised their voices. "Champagne, miss?" Clara asked, her voice trembling slightly. The woman in the red velvet dress didn't even look at her, just snatched a glass. Clara pulled back, her arm throbbing. The bruise hidden beneath the long sleeve of her uniform was 3 days old, but it burned as if the impact had happened seconds ago. Just 2 more hours, she told herself. 2 more hours, $60 in tips, and I can pay the motel bill. But the air in the ballroom was getting thin. It smelled of expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and the metallic tang of fear rising in her own throat. She had seen him. Across the room, near the orchestra, stood a man in a grey suit. Detective Silas Vane. The man who had promised to protect her. The man who wore a badge by day and turned into a monster by night. He was laughing, shaking hands with the mayor. He looked charming. He looked safe. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. If Silas saw her working here, if he knew she hadn't left the city like he ordered, he wouldn't just hit her this time. He would finish it. She spun around too quickly. The world tilted. A wave of nausea rolled over her, black spots dancing in her vision. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Saving money for a bus ticket to Oregon took priority over food. The heat of the room pressed against her skin, sticky and suffocating. "Move," she commanded her legs. "Get to the kitchen." She took a step, but the floor seemed to drop away. The tray of champagne slipped from her fingers. Smash! The sound of shattering glass silenced the orchestra. The chatter stopped. Clara froze, the room spinning violently now. She looked down at the shards of crystal and the golden puddle of champagne soaking into the hem of her cheap black trousers. "You clumsy idiot," the floor manager hissed, rushing toward her. Clara backed away, gasping. "I'm sorry, But she couldn't finish. The edges of her vision went black. Her knees buckled. She waited for the impact of the hard marble, bracing herself for the pain. It never came. Instead, an arm like an iron bar wrapped around her waist. It halted her fall with terrifying strength. She was hauled upward, pulled against a chest that felt as solid as a vault door. She smelled sandalwood, gunpowder, and rain. "Steady," a voice rumbled. It was deep, rough, a baritone that vibrated through her chest. Clara blinked, trying to clear the fog. She looked up. The man holding her was tall, impossibly tall. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than her entire life's earnings. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of cold espresso. They were sharp, intelligent, and currently narrowed in assessment. This was Lorenzo Moretti. Even Clara, who lived in the shadows, knew the name. The papers called him a logistics magnate. The whispers in the back alleys called him the Capo dei Capi, the boss of bosses. "I'm sorry, Mr. Moretti," the floor manager stammered, his face pale. "She's new. I'll have security remove her immediately." Lorenzo ignored him. His gaze was fixed on Clara. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at her arm. In the fall, her sleeve had ridden up. The foundation she had used to cover the marks had rubbed off against his tuxedo jacket, exposed on her pale forearm with the distinct, ugly purple marks of 4 fingers and a thumb. A grip mark, violent and fresh. Lorenzo's hand, the one holding her up, shifted. His thumb brushed the bruise, feather light. Clara hissed in pain and tried to pull away, but he held her fast. The temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lorenzo looked up from her arm to her eyes. The indifference in his face vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory focus. He didn't care about the ruined champagne. He didn't care about the staring crowd. "Who?" he asked. One word. Quiet. But it carried more weight than a scream. Clara couldn't breathe. "I fell. It was an accident." Lorenzo's eyes darkened. He shifted his grip, pulling her closer so only she could hear him. "I know what a fall looks like, Tesoro, and I know what a hand looks like." He scanned the crowd, his eyes predatory, scanning the room like a shark sensing blood in the water. "Who hurt you?" Clara felt the darkness claiming her again. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her empty. "Please," she whispered, her head lolling against his shoulder. "Don't let him see me." "Who?" Lorenzo demanded again, his voice urgent now. "The cop," she breathed, her consciousness slipping. "Silas." And then the lights went out. Waking up felt like surfacing from deep water. Clara didn't wake up on the floor of the Palmer house. She didn't wake up in a hospital with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She woke up on sheets that felt like spun silk. She bolted upright, gasping. Pain shot through her ribs, but it wasn't new pain. It was the old ache from where Silas had kicked her last week. She clutched her side, looking around wildly. The room was cavernous. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the Chicago skyline, the city lights looking like scattered diamonds against the velvet night. The furniture was dark leather and mahogany. A fireplace crackled in the corner, the only source of warmth in the austere, masculine space. This was a penthouse. And not just any penthouse. "You're awake." Clara flinched, scrambling back against the headboard. Lorenzo Moretti sat in a wingback chair by the fire. He had shed his tuxedo jacket and bow tie. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. Sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and inked with faint, intricate tattoos. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. He didn't look at her. He stared into the fire. "Where am I?" Clara's voice was a croak. "My home," Lorenzo said calmly. "The doctors just left. You're malnourished, dehydrated, and you have 2 cracked ribs." He took a sip of his drink, and enough bruising to suggest someone has been using you as a punching bag for months. Clara pulled the duvet up to her chin, hiding her body. "I have to go. If he finds out I'm not at the motel, he won't." Lorenzo finally turned to look at her. The firelight cast long shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw and the ruthless set of his mouth. "You said a name before you passed out," Lorenzo said, standing up. He moved with the silent grace of a predator. He walked to the bedside table and placed a glass of water there. "Silas." "Detective Silas Vane." Clara stopped breathing. I was delirious." "My men ran a check," Lorenzo continued, ignoring her denial. "Silas Vane, Vice Squad, decorated, hero of the city." Lorenzo let out a short, humorless laugh, and apparently a man who enjoys breaking women's bones. He sat on the edge of the bed. It was an intimate gesture, but there was nothing romantic about it. It was an invasion, a claiming of space. Clara tried to scoot away, but the bed was massive, and she was trapped. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm a server." "You are a woman who fainted in my arms," Lorenzo said softly. "In my world, Clara. We have rules. We are criminals, yes. We steal, we smuggle, we kill when necessary. But we do not touch women. And we do not touch children." His eyes dropped to her arm, where the bruise was now treated with a cooling gel. "But there is a complication," Lorenzo said. "What complication?" Silas Vane isn't just a dirty cop who hits his girlfriend, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping an octave. He is the bagman for the O'Connell Syndicate, the Irish mob, my rivals. Clara's eyes went wide. She knew Silas was corrupt. He took envelopes of cash in parking garages all the time. But she didn't know the politics. He owes me money, Lorenzo said, a lot of it, and since he cannot pay, he has been trading information about my shipments to the feds to clear his debt with the Irish. Lorenzo leaned in, his face inches from hers. She could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You are the leverage I have been looking for. Clara felt cold. You're going to use me? To get to him? No, Lorenzo said. He reached out. Clara flinched, squeezing her eyes shut. But he didn't strike her. His fingers, rough and calloused, brushed a stray lock of hair away from her forehead. The touch was shockingly gentle. I am going to keep you, he corrected, or you are going to stay here, in this apartment. You will eat my food. You will wear the clothes I buy you. You will recover. And then, Clara asked, trembling. And then, Lorenzo said, standing up and walking back to the fire, I am going to use the fact that I have you to make Silas Vane do exactly what I want. He thinks he owns you. When he realizes I have you, he will panic. He will make a mistake. He'll kill you, Clara said. He's crazy, Lorenzo. He has the police department in his pocket. Lorenzo turned back to her, a terrifying smile playing on his lips. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a sheepdog. Let him try, Lorenzo said. He has a badge. I have an army. He walked to the door. Rest, Clara. Matteo is outside the door. If you need anything, ask. If you try to leave, he will stop you. For your own safety. Why? She called out before he could leave. Why not just kill him? Why involve me? Lorenzo paused, his hand on the brass knob. He didn't turn around. Because, he said, his voice low, when I saw those marks on your skin, it wasn't business anymore. He opened the door. It became personal. The door clicked shut, locking her in the golden cage. Clara sank back into the pillows, her mind racing. She had traded a monster for the devil himself. Silas beat her with his fists. Lorenzo Moretti was planning to use her as a chess piece in a war she didn't understand. But as she touched the spot on her forehead where his fingers had grazed, she realized something terrifying. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of the light he was threatening to shine on her life. The morning sun over Chicago didn't feel like a blessing. To Clara, it felt like an interrogator's spotlight. She stood in the doorway of the guest bedroom, her fingers gripping the frame until her knuckles turned white. She was wearing a silk robe she had found draped over the chair. Midnight blue, smelling faintly of lavender and expensive detergent. It cost more than the car she used to drive before Silas sold it. For 20 minutes, she had been trying to work up the courage to walk down the hallway. The silence of the penthouse was heavy. It wasn't the peaceful silence of an empty house. It was the predatory silence of a jungle where the apex predator was sleeping. Or waiting. He hasn't hurt you, a small voice in her head whispered. Yet, the louder, more experienced voice countered. Silas bought you flowers the first week too. Hunger eventually won out over fear. Her stomach gave a painful twist, a reminder that the champagne at the gala hadn't been dinner. Clara took a step, the plush carpet swallowing the sound of her bare feet. She followed the smell of coffee, rich, dark roast, down the corridor. The kitchen was a masterpiece of slate and stainless steel, open concept and terrifyingly sterile. But the domesticity of the scene before her jarred her senses. Lorenzo Moretti was standing by the stove. He was dressed in black dress pants and a white t-shirt that stretched tight across his broad back. The tattoos on his arms were fully visible now, intricate geometric patterns mixed with old-world Latin script. He was flipping an omelette with a casual dexterity that suggested he did this often. "Eat," he said without turning around. Clara jumped, her hand flying to her throat. "I didn't mean to sneak up on you." You didn't, Lorenzo said, sliding the omelette onto a plate. He turned, and the morning light caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked tired, but alert. I heard you open your door 20 minutes ago. I heard you pace 3 times. I heard your breathing change when you stepped into the hall. He set the plate on the marble island. Sit, it wasn't a request. Clara sat on the high stool, staring at the eggs, toast, and sliced fruit. It looked like a meal for a queen. I can't pay you for this, she whispered, looking down at her hands. I have $11 in my pocket. Lorenzo poured 2 espressos. He slid one toward her and took a sip of his own, leaning his hip against the counter. He watched her with that unsettling, laser-focused intensity. I don't want your $11, Clara. Then what do you want? She looked up, her blue eyes wide and haunted. Men like you always want something. Silas wanted control. He wanted a punching bag that cooked dinner. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. He set his cup down with a sharp clack. First, he said, his voice low and dangerous, stop comparing me to him. If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have caught you. I would have let you hit the floor. He walked around the island, stopping just inches from her stool. Clara instinctively leaned back, bracing for a blow. Lorenzo froze. He saw the flinch, a shadow of something. Regret, rage, passed over his eyes. He deliberately clasped his hands behind his back to show he wasn't a threat. Eat, he repeated, softer this time. We have business to discuss, and I don't negotiate with fainting women. Clara took a bite, then another. The food woke up her senses, and within minutes the plate was empty. Lorenzo refilled her water glass without a word. Silas Vane, Lorenzo said, the name sounding like a curse in his mouth. Tell me how he has you. You said he has a badge, but a badge doesn't stop a woman from leaving unless there is leverage. What is it? Clara stared at the empty plate. The shame burned hotter than the coffee. My brother, she said quietly. Toby. He's 19. He got caught up with some bad people 2 years ago, selling drugs. Small time? Very. He was stupid. He got arrested. Clara swallowed hard. Silas was the arresting officer. He came to me. He said he could make the charges disappear, keep Toby out of prison if you were nice to him. Lorenzo finished, disgust dripping from his tone. He said we could date, that he was a good guy, and for a month he was. He made the charges go away. Toby is in a rehab program in Ohio now. But Silas, he kept the file. He said if I ever left him, if I ever tried to run, he'd reactivate the charges. He'd plant evidence. He said he'd make sure Toby died in prison. She looked up at Lorenzo, tears brimming in her eyes. He owns me, Mr. Moretti. If I don't go back, Toby goes to jail. Lorenzo was silent for a long time. He turned away, walking towards the massive window that overlooked the city. He looked like a statue, carved from marble and wrath. He doesn't own you, Lorenzo said finally. He is renting you on borrowed time. Lorenzo picked up a remote control from the counter and clicked a button. A flat-screen TV embedded in the wall flickered to life. This is from this morning's news briefing, Lorenzo said. Clara watched, horror dawning on her face. On the screen, Silas Vane stood in front of a podium, flanked by microphones. He looked devastated. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair slightly messy. The perfect picture of a worried lover. We are very concerned, Silas was saying to the cameras, his voice cracking with emotion. My fiancée, Clara, has been struggling with severe mental health issues. She stopped taking her medication 2 days ago. She was last seen at the Palmer house. She is confused, paranoid, and potentially a danger to herself. If anyone sees her, please do not approach her. Call the number on the screen. She imagines things. She might claim people are hurting her. It's part of her delusion. The reporter nodded sympathetically. A hero cop searching for his lost love. A tragedy in the making. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. He's destroying me. He's making sure no one will believe me. He is smart. Lorenzo admitted, turning off the TV. He is painting a narrative. If you go to the police now, they will institutionalize you. If you run, you are a missing person. He has boxed you in. Clara put her head in her hands. I have to go back. I have to tell him I'm sorry. Maybe he won't kill me. No. The word was absolute. Lorenzo walked back to her. He placed his hands on the counter, leaning in until he filled her vision. You are not going back to him. You are going to stay here. I can't, Clara cried, standing up. He'll hurt Toby. He won't touch Toby, Lorenzo said calmly, because as of this morning, the rehab center in Ohio has a new benefactor. My private security team is currently stationed outside your brother's room. No one gets in or out without my authorization. Not even the police. Clara stopped. What? I moved your brother's file too, Lorenzo said casually, as if discussing the weather. Or rather, my hacker did. The digital evidence against him is gone. The physical evidence. Well, let's just say the evidence locker at the precinct had a plumbing accident last night. Clara stared at him, her mouth agape. You did all that? In one night? I am thorough, Lorenzo said, but that is not enough. Silas will come for you. He will use the law. He will use his badge. He will use the Irish mob. Lorenzo straightened his cuffs. So we need a shield. A shield that even a corrupt cop cannot break. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He tossed it onto the counter. It slid across the marble and stopped in front of Clara. Open it. Clara's hands trembled as she opened the box. Inside sat a diamond ring. It was vintage, cut in a sharp emerald shape, surrounded by rubies that looked like drops of blood. It was heavy, ancient, and undeniably a Moretti heirloom. What is this? She whispered. A contract, Lorenzo said. Silas claims you are his fiancé. We are going to prove him wrong. He walked around the counter, standing behind her. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a warm wall at her back. You are going to marry me, Clara. She spun around. What? Are you crazy? Not legally, Lorenzo clarified. Not yet, but publicly. Yes, the city knows I do not date. They know I am a ghost. If I step out with a woman, if I put the Moretti ring on her finger, it is a declaration of war against anyone who touches her. Why? Clara asked, her voice breaking. Why would you do this for a stranger? Lorenzo looked down at her. For the first time, she saw a crack in his armor. He looked at the bruise on her arm, then back to her eyes. Because I know what it is like to be powerless, he said softly, and because I've been looking for an excuse to crush Silas Vane for a long time. You are giving me the key to his destruction. He picked up the ring from the box. Wear this, he said, and you become untouchable. The police cannot harass the wife of Lorenzo Moretti. The Irish mob will not touch you, for fear of starting a war they cannot win. You will be safe. And in return, Clara asked, wary. What do I have to do? You play the part, Lorenzo said. You attend events with me. You smile. You let the world think you belong to me. He held the ring out, waiting. And behind closed doors, she asked, her voice barely audible. Behind closed doors, Lorenzo said solemnity, you are free. You sleep in your own room. You do what you want. I will never touch you unless you ask me to. It was a deal with the devil, but looking at the ring, and then thinking of Silas's fists, Clara realized the devil was offering her the one thing God never had. Protection. She held out her hand. Lorenzo slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been resized while she slept. Good, Lorenzo said. His hand lingered on hers for a second longer than necessary. Go get dressed. We have a lunch appointment at the Langham. It is time we introduced my fiancé to the city. The transition from the safe, sterile silence of the penthouse to the roaring chaos of downtown Chicago was jarring. Clara sat in the passenger seat of Lorenzo's matte black Aston Martin. The leather smelled of him, sandalwood and steel. She was wearing a cream-colored dress he had acquired for her that morning. It was modest, high-necked, but tailored so perfectly, it made her feel like armor plating had been wrapped in silk. The bruise on her arm was hidden by a matching blazer, but the ring on her finger felt like it weighed 50 pounds. "Relax," Lorenzo said. He was driving with one hand, his eyes scanning the mirrors constantly. "You look like you're going to an execution." "I feel like I am," Clara muttered. "Silas is going to see this. He's going to come for me." "Let him see," Lorenzo said, his voice hard. "That is the point." They pulled up to the curb in front of an exclusive boutique on Michigan Avenue. Lorenzo didn't park. He just stopped. Immediately, a valet rushed over, looking terrified as he recognized the car. Lorenzo got out and walked around to her side. He opened the door and offered his hand. "Take it," he commanded softly. Clara placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, grounding. As she stepped out onto the pavement, the wind whipped her hair. But Lorenzo stepped in close, shielding her with his body. "Eyes up," he whispered near her ear. "You are not a victim today. You are a queen. Walk like it." They entered the boutique. It was the kind of place where there were no price tags, and the assistants looked like runway models. The moment Lorenzo walked in, the atmosphere shifted. The chatter stopped. The manager, a sharp-faced woman named Celine, hurried over. "Mr. Moretti," she said, bowing her head slightly. "We weren't expecting you." "I need a wardrobe for my fiancé," Lorenzo said, his voice carrying through the silent shop. The word fiancé dropped like a bomb. Heads turned, phones were subtly pulled out. Clara felt her face heat up, but Lorenzo's hand on the small of her back kept her steady. "Of course," Celine stammered, looking at Clara with new respect. "Anfia, right this way." For an hour, Clara was a doll. She tried on evening gowns, cocktail dresses, winter coats. Lorenzo sat on a velvet sofa, rejecting or approving items with a single nod or a shake of his head. He didn't look at his phone. He watched her. "The red one," he said when she walked out in a crimson gown that left her back exposed. "It's too much," Clara said, looking in the mirror. She saw the faint yellowing of a bruise on her shoulder blade. Lorenzo stood up and walked behind her. He met her eyes in the mirror. "It covers the marks," he murmured, so only she could hear. "And it looks like blood. It suits the war we are starting." He handed his credit card to Celine. "Send everything to the penthouse. We will take the coat now." As they walked back out onto Michigan Avenue, the energy on the street had changed. It was busier, louder. Lorenzo paused on the sidewalk, buttoning his coat. He seemed to sniff the air. His body went rigid. "Get in the car," he said. His voice was different, clipped, urgent. "What?" Clara asked. "Now, Clara." He shoved her towards the passenger door, but it was too late. A black SUV screeched around the corner, jumping the curb 3 car lengths away. Tires smoked. People screamed. The back window of the SUV rolled down. Clara saw the barrel of a submachine gun before she processed what it was. "Down!" Lorenzo roared. He didn't dive for cover, he dove for her. He tackled her against the side of the Aston Martin, his massive body covering hers completely, just as the air exploded. Rat-a-tat-tat-tat. Glass shattered. The shop window behind them exploded into 1,000,000 diamonds. Bullets sparked off the pavement and pinged against the car's chassis. Clara screamed, her face pressed against the cold asphalt, the weight of Lorenzo crushing the breath out of her. She could feel the vibrations of the impacts through his chest. The shooting stopped as quickly as it began. Tires squealed as the SUV sped off, merging back into traffic. Silence followed, a ringing, deafening silence, before the screaming started. "Lorenzo," Clara gasped. He didn't move immediately. He was heavy, dead weight on top of her. "Lorenzo." He groaned, a low, guttural sound. He pushed himself up on one arm, shaking his head as if to clear it. "Are you hit?" he demanded, his voice rough. He grabbed her face, his hands checking her frantically. "Clara, look at me. Are you hit?" "No, I don't think so." She was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. "You saved me." Lorenzo tried to stand, but he stumbled. Clara looked down. The pristine white snow on the sidewalk was staining red. A lot of red. "You're bleeding," she screamed. Lorenzo looked down at his left thigh. The fabric of his trousers was torn, and blood was pulsing out in a dark, steady rhythm. A ricochet, or a direct hit. It's fine, he gritted out, his face pale. Get in the car, I can drive. You can't drive, Clara cried. We need an ambulance. No police, Lorenzo snarled. No hospitals. They will finish the job there. Get in the damn car. The security team, Matteo and two others, pulled up in a second vehicle a moment too late. They jumped out, guns drawn, shouting orders. Boss, Matteo yelled, running over. Put her in the car, Lorenzo ordered, leaning heavily on the hood of the Aston. Get us home. Call the doctor. The private doctor. Matteo practically threw Clara into the back of the SUV, and two men helped Lorenzo in beside her. He groaned as his leg bent, his face glistening with sweat. As the car sped away, weaving through the panicked traffic, Lorenzo slumped back against the leather seat. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. Clara instinctively reached out. She had spent 2 years learning first aid because she was too afraid to go to hospitals for her own injuries. She ripped the silk scarf from her neck. Move your hand, she ordered. Her voice was surprisingly steady. Lorenzo opened one eye. What are you doing? Saving your life, she snapped. Move. He moved his hand. Clara wrapped the scarf tightly around his thigh, high up, creating a makeshift tourniquet. She pulled it tight, hard. Lorenzo hissed in pain, his hand gripping her shoulder. He squeezed hard, but not to hurt her. To ground himself. Who was it? Clara asked, her hands covered in his warm, sticky blood. Was it Silas? Lorenzo looked at her. His eyes were hazy with pain, but the rage in them was focused and terrifying. Silas doesn't have the balls for a drive-by on Michigan Avenue, Lorenzo rasped. This was the Irish, the O'Connells. He reached up with a bloody hand and touched her cheek. He left a smear of crimson on her pale skin. Silas told them where we were, Lorenzo whispered. He sold you out to get his debt cleared. He tried to have us both killed. Clara stared at the blood on her hands. The fear that had paralyzed her for years began to calcify into something else, something cold, something like the look in Lorenzo's eyes. Silas hadn't just tried to hurt her. He had tried to kill the only person who had ever protected her. Hold on, Clara whispered, pressing harder on the wound as the car swerved around a corner. Just hold on, Lorenzo. Lorenzo let out a dark, breathless chuckle. I'm not going anywhere, tesoro, he murmured, his eyes slipping shut. I have a wedding to plan. The penthouse was no longer a sanctuary. It was a fortress under siege. Lorenzo lay on the massive leather sofa in the living room, his leg propped up on 2 pillows. The doctor, an older man named Dr. Aris, who smelled of peppermint and despair, had just finished stitching the wound. It was a through and through. Messy, painful, but it hadn't hit the artery. Clara stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed. She was still wearing the blood-stained cream dress, refusing to change until she knew Lorenzo was stable. He needs rest, Dr. Aris said, packing his bag, and he needs to stay off that leg for at least 2 weeks. If the stitches tear, the infection risk is high. 2 weeks, Lorenzo grunted, trying to sit up. His face was gray, slick with sweat, but his eyes were still burning with that terrifying intelligence. I don't have 2 hours, let alone 2 weeks. The O'Connells will think I'm weak. They'll strike again tonight. They won't, Clara said, her voice cut through the masculine tension in the room like a scalpel. Lorenzo stopped struggling. Matteo, who was reloading a pistol by the window, looked up. What did you say? Lorenzo asked, his voice low. Clara walked over to him. She didn't look like the terrified girl who had fainted at the gala anymore. The blood on her dress looked like war paint. I said they won't, she repeated, because they think you're dying, and we're going to let them believe it. She sat on the edge of the coffee table directly in Lorenzo's line of sight. Silas is a coward, Clara said, her voice steady. He operates on fear and information. He told the O'Connells where we were. He wants you dead, so his debt is cleared. But if he thinks you're dead or incapacitated, he'll get sloppy. He'll come out of the shadows to claim his victory." Lorenzo studied her. For a moment, the pain in his eyes was replaced by fascination. "You have a plan." "I do," Clara said. "Silas thinks I'm a victim. He thinks I'm delusional and lost. He thinks I'm weak. That is his blind spot." She reached out and took Lorenzo's hand. His skin was hot, feverish. "He expects me to run," she whispered. "He doesn't expect me to hunt." Lorenzo tightened his grip on her hand. "You are not going near him, Clara. I forbid it." "You don't own me yet, Lorenzo," she said softly, echoing his words from before. "We have a contract, and part of that contract is that I play the role of your fiancé. Well, a grieving fiancé is a powerful thing." She looked at Matteo. "Give me your phone." Matteo hesitated, looking at his boss. Lorenzo gave a barely perceptible nod. Clara took the phone. She dialed a number she knew by heart. The private line of the city editor for the Chicago Chronicle. Silas loved press. He lived for the headlines. "Hello?" a gruff voice answered. "This is Clara Bennett," she said, her voice trembling. Fake trembling. "I need to make a statement. About Detective Vane, and about Lorenzo Moretti." She paused, looking at Lorenzo. He was watching her with an intensity that made her knees weak, even now. "Mr. Moretti has been shot," she sobbed into the phone, tears streaming down her face on command. "He's in critical condition. The doctors say he might not make it through the night. And I'm so scared. I need Silas. Tell him I'm ready to come home. Tell him I'm sorry." She hung up. The room was silent. Clara wiped the fake tears from her face, her expression turning stone cold. "There," she said. "Now we wait. You just told the world I am dying," Lorenzo said, a slow smirk spreading across his face despite the pain. "And you invited the wolf to my door." "He won't come here," Clara said. "He's too smart for that. He'll want to meet somewhere neutral, somewhere he feels in control. He'll call me back within the hour." Lorenzo pulled her closer, ignoring the strain on his leg. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles that were white from clenching. "You are dangerous, Tesoro," he murmured against her skin. "I think I am more afraid of you than I am of the Irish." "Good," Clara whispered, leaning her forehead against his, "because I'm done being afraid of him." The meeting was set for midnight at the Old Navy Pier shipping yards. It was a cliché, a place of rust and shadows, but it was exactly the kind of theatrical stage Silas Vane loved. The wind off Lake Michigan was biting, cutting through Clara's coat like knives. She stood under the flickering yellow light of a lone lamppost, her hands deep in her pockets. She was alone, or so it seemed. 50 yards away, hidden in the labyrinth of shipping containers, lay Lorenzo Moretti. He was pumped full of adrenaline and painkillers, a sniper rifle resting on his shoulder. Matteo and 6 other men were ghosts in the darkness, circling the perimeter. A car approached, not a police cruiser, but a sleek, unmarked sedan. The headlights blinded her for a moment. The car stopped. The engine cut. Silas Vane stepped out. He looked impeccable. His trench coat was tailored, his hair perfectly styled. He didn't look like a man who had ordered a hit hours ago. He looked like a savior. "Clara," he said, opening his arms. "Oh, thank God. I was so worried." He walked toward her, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. He stopped 5 feet away, scanning her face. He was looking for bruises. He was looking for fear. Clara let her shoulders slump. She let her lip tremble. "Is he dead?" Silas asked. His voice was soft, concerned, but his eyes were glittering with greed. "He's in a coma." Clara lied, her voice cracking. "The doctors said he won't wake up. Silas, I didn't know where else to go. You were right. I was confused. I was sick." Silas smiled. It was the smile he used when he got a confession in the interrogation room. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now. I can fix everything, just like I fixed Toby." Clara took a step closer. "Did you have to hurt him, Lorenzo?" Silas laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. Hurt him? Clara, I erased him. He was a problem. He was getting in the way of our future. But the shooting, Clara pressed, her hand tightening around the small device in her pocket. There were innocent people. Collateral damage, Silas waved a hand dismissively. The O'Connells are messy, but they get the job done. I gave them the location, and they took the shot. Now, Moretti is out of the picture, the Irish debt is gone, and I get you back. He reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was familiar, painful, possessive. You belong to me, Clara. You always have. No Mafia trash is going to change that. You're right, Clara said. Her voice changed. The tremble vanished. She looked up at him, her blue eyes hard as diamonds. I don't belong to Mafia trash. She pulled her hand out of her pocket. In her palm sat a small, blinking digital recorder. And I don't belong to you. Silas froze. He looked at the recorder, then back at her face. The realization hit him like a physical blow. You bitch, he snarled, reaching for his service weapon. Click, the sound of a round being chambered, echoed from the darkness behind him. Don't, a deep voice commanded. Silas spun around. Lorenzo Moretti stepped out from behind a shipping container. He was leaning heavily on a cane, his leg bandaged, but the gun in his hand was rock steady. Lorenzo, Silas breathed, his face draining of color. You're supposed to be dying. I have a high pain tolerance, Lorenzo said, limping forward, and a very good reason to live. Silas looked around wildly. He saw Matteo emerge from the shadows. Then another man. Then another. He was surrounded. You can't touch me, Silas shouted, his voice rising in panic. I'm a police officer. You kill me, the entire force comes down on you. I'm not going to kill you, Silas, Lorenzo said calmly. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it at Silas's feet. Photos spilled out. Photos of Silas meeting with the O'Connell lieutenants. Bank transfers, the recording of the hit being ordered. And neither are the police, Lorenzo continued, because 5 minutes ago, that recording Clara just made was live-streamed to the Internal Affairs server and to the mayor's private email. Silas stared at the photos. His hands began to shake. But, Lorenzo added, his voice dropping to a growl, before they get here to arrest you, I have a debt to settle. Lorenzo holstered his gun. He handed his cane to Matteo. He stood on his own, swaying slightly, pain radiating up his leg. But he didn't falter. He walked up to Silas. Silas threw a punch. It was desperate, sloppy. Lorenzo caught his fist in midair. The sound of bones crunching was sickeningly loud. Silas screamed, dropping to his knees. Lorenzo didn't stop. He didn't hit him. He simply grabbed Silas by the throat and lifted him, staring into his eyes. You asked her who hurt her, Lorenzo whispered. You did, and now you are going to feel every bruise you ever put on her. He threw Silas to the ground. Matteo, Lorenzo said, turning his back. Make sure he is comfortable. Until the police arrive, and make sure the O'Connells know exactly who set them up. Lorenzo walked over to Clara. He didn't ask if she was okay. He knew she was. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her into his side. Let's go home, he said. Behind them, the sirens began to wail in the distance. But for the first time in her life, the sound didn't make Clara afraid. It sounded like victory. 3 months later, the ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was exactly as it had been the night they met. The chandeliers glared, the champagne flowed, and the elite of Chicago mingled in their expensive silks. But everything else had changed. Clara Bennett walked into the room, and the music didn't stop, but the conversation did. She wasn't wearing a server's uniform. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged every curve, dusted with diamonds that caught the light like stars. On her finger, the Moretti ring flashed. She didn't walk with her head down. She walked with her chin high, her arm looped through Lorenzo's. Lorenzo moved with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of the night on Michigan Avenue. But it only made him look more dangerous. He wore a black tuxedo, tailored to perfection. They moved through the crowd like royalty. The same people who had ignored Clara when she was serving them drinks now bowed their heads, offering congratulations, seeking favor. "Mr. Moretti, Mrs. Moretti," the mayor said, sweating slightly as he shook Lorenzo's hand. "Wonderful to see you. A tragedy about Detective Vane, wasn't it? Suicide in his holding cell. Terrible business." "Terrible," Lorenzo agreed smoothly, his face a mask of polite indifference, "but justice has a way of working itself out." He looked down at Clara. "Doesn't it, Clara?" "It certainly does." Clara smiled. It was a genuine smile. They moved away from the mayor, finding a quiet corner near the balcony. "You look beautiful," Lorenzo said, turning her to face him. "You look tired," Clara countered, adjusting his bow tie. "Does the leg hurt?" "Only when it rains," Lorenzo lied. He touched her cheek. "I received the final paperwork today. The adoption for Toby went through. He's officially a ward of the Moretti Trust. His college is paid for." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Lorenzo, I don't know how to thank you." "I told you," he said, his voice dropping to that intimate rumble that made her toes curl. "You don't thank me. You are my wife." "Not legally," Clara teased, echoing their first conversation. "Just a contract, remember?" Lorenzo reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Read it." Clara unfolded the paper. It was a marriage license, a real one, dated for today, signed by the judge who owed Lorenzo a favor. "I don't want a contract anymore, Clara," Lorenzo said. He took her hand, pressing it against his heart. "I want the vow. I want the fight. I want you." He looked at her with a vulnerability that stripped away the Mafia boss and left just the man. "You fell into my arms to escape," he whispered. "I am asking you to stay, because you want to." Clara looked at the paper, then at the man who had burned down the world to keep her warm. She thought of the bruises that had healed, the nightmares that had stopped, and the strength she had found in the reflection of his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. Lorenzo smiled, a true, dazzling smile. He leaned down and kissed her, right there in the middle of the ballroom, in front of the city, in front of the ghosts of their past. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was possessive, deep, and full of promises. When they pulled apart, Lorenzo looked at her arm. The skin was flawless, creamy and unmarred. "Who hurt you?" he asked, a playful echo of the question that started it all. Clara smiled, lacing her fingers with his. "No one," she said. "Not anymore." And that, my friends, is how a spilled tray of champagne toppled an empire. From a server running for her life to the Queen of Chicago, Clara didn't just find a savior. She found her equal. Lorenzo Moretti might be the villain in everyone else's story, but in hers, he was the only hero who mattered. If this story gave you chills, if you loved the twist where Clara took back her power, smash that like button right now. It helps the channel so much. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll never miss the next dark romance saga. What would you do if you were in Clara's shoes? Would you trust Lorenzo? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and watch where you fall.